Well, nearly half of total tax refunds have been issued so far, and according to Morgan Stanley research, the 2020 refund season is tracking in line with previous years. And we're taking a look at the best financial strategies ahead of tax day in our Spending Smart segment provided by TrackPhone. And joining us now is Mattie Duppler. She's Senior Fellow at the National Taxpayers Union. Mattie, good to see you again. When we look at this, you say that people's financial plans shouldn't all be about the tax refund, but still important when we think about, getting money back from the government. An interest-free loan, though. So what should people be thinking about this season?
This is my lot in life, is to remind people that depending on your tax refund is not a personal finance strategy. Put another way, this is literally just money you are giving interest-free to the government for an entire year when you certainly could be doing more with that money for your own personal financial future, particularly after the changes that were made in the law in 2017. Changes to the withholding components in the law made sure that Americans got more money back in their paycheck every month, $100 or $200 for the typical American every single month. So think about what you could do with that money. Rather than letting the government hold on to it for you, you could be investing that. You could be saving it. You could be using it to pay down debt. All of those are better things to do than to be waiting until April 15th to get a tax refund back, because then that money can't work for you and then it could have been doing over the course of the previous year.
Agree, but it's kind of ingrained in us where we expect that tax refund. We want to spend it. Would you recommend people actually purchasing stocks right now, given all the volatility with your tax refund?
Yes, I had a lot of friends calling me yesterday freaking out, asking, what does this mean? Listen, if you're someone like me who's in her early 30s, I'm not even looking to touch most of my investments for 30 years. Everything that matters in investing is informed by your own goals. So that's the first thing you should be looking at, particularly in times of market volatility. What are my goals for my investments? When you're looking at a 30-year horizon, a day like yesterday doesn't affect you at all, and it means that you don't have to get nervous and anxious about what's happening in the market today, because those losses will certainly not have a huge impact on your portfolio over the course of the next several decades. So I always remind people that what you should be doing with your money is informed by what your goals are in the long term, and particularly if there is a long horizon for your goals, that should make you even more conservative now, because you're going to have a lot of runway to make up any losses in the future.
That's a very good question. I mean, when we think about what people should be thinking about differently this tax season compared to some in the past, there are always these tweaks, the rules that change. Not sure if there are any that stand out to you that might be worth noting in terms of people thinking differently this time around.
Right. Well, as I mentioned, that change in the tax law in 2017 changed a couple of things. One thing I always remind people, even though at tax season it's a little too late for this, make sure that your W-4 is updated at work. Make sure that if you've had a major life event, a divorce, you've got a new kid, anything like that that's going to affect your tax filing status, make sure that you've updated that information at work so that the government isn't withholding too much money or too little money so that you have a shock at tax season. But because of the tax changes made to the law in 2017, taxes actually have become simpler for the majority of Americans. Before the changes to that tax law, we had more people itemizing, which means that you were sorting through receipts, trying to take different deductions as you were doing your taxes. Now, 9 out of 10 Americans take that standard deduction because it was double as a result of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. So that means that taxes have become a lot simpler for Americans, and it also means it allows you more clarity, more ability to plan. It means you don't have to count on that refund or think going into April 15th every year that your tax situation is going to be drastically different, because there's certainly going to be a lot more certainty for taxpayers as they look at their taxes each year as a result of taking that standard deduction.
Yeah.
Mattie, wouldn't the flip side of that is that folks are looking at some people who actually adjusted their tax withholding, or their employers did, the way you're suggesting people do, then look and say, but I don't have the refund I used to, or I don't have the refund I expect was coming. What should people be bearing in mind when it comes to that kind of circumstance?
Right. Well, one thing I always like to remind people is that your tax refund has absolutely nothing to do with your tax liability. We had a lot of misinformation last year during tax season when politicians in particular were trying to make the argument that because your tax refund is lower, your tax circumstances have changed so that you have a higher tax burden. That's certainly not true. All the things we've talked about today are why your tax refund might change. The fact that most Americans have more money in their pocket throughout the course of the year, of course, is going to mean they get fewer dollars back from the IRS at the end of that tax year. that doesn't mean that you have higher taxes and more taxes that you're paying. That's why it's so important for Americans to take charge of their own financial futures and plan ahead. Step number one is making sure that W-4 is correct, so you know exactly what's coming in and out of your paycheck every single month. But step number two then is preparing. Knowing if your tax refund is going to be lower, but you have more money in your paycheck every month, ask yourself what you can be doing with that money. Make sure you're paying down expensive debt first. Make sure you're creating some sort of nest eggs as savings so that if some kind of event comes up, you can cover the cost of that. And then in the very third thing I would suggest is making sure that you're investing in your future and you're looking at your goals in the long term to make sure your money is working for you.
Yeah, and interesting to see when we look at plans to spend in 2019 versus 2018 and what people are thinking going into it this year. 6% saying casino gambling might be what they use their refund for. 9%
hey, now
stock
that sports
market.
betting is legal.
Hey, there are more options out there.
Flush.
Home improvement at about 17, money into savings 44, pay off debt 44% as well. So promising to see some of this stuff here. But Mattie Duppler, thank you so much for joining us with that. Appreciate it.